All right, so let's talk a little bit about PHP. Title of the talk is PHP, using server-side programming for fun and profit. So just a quick recap for those of you that were here on Thursday. I went a little bit over how a web app sort of works. The picture looks sort of something like this, where there's you, and you tell your browser to go through the internet and get some stuff from a server, and then the server does some magic, gets some information, and sends it back to you. Okay, so we talked a little bit about last time. Like I was saying, there's you ask your browser for some information, it goes over the internet, talks to a server, does some magic, server does some magic, gets you the information, and then sends it all back. So today we're going to talk about this part, the magic. The other day we sort of talked about what this sort of chain looks like. We're going to dive in a little bit here. So if you remember, we talked about basically what happens to your browser, talks to the server, and it announces itself to the world. And it says, here's everything about me, here's my life story, here's some cookies, here's everything I know. Can I please have this page? And then the server says, yeah, here it is. But what's going on in there? Like, what's the server doing? You'll remember that the server is just any program that can output text, any program that can take a browser's request and then serve some HTML or some other stuff to it. And then we had this slide up here that I just copied and pasted from the other one, where there are these special programs that are server-side programming languages that basically let you write a program without having to worry about all of the intricacies of HTTP and everything else that comes along with that. And one of them is PHP. So that's what we're going to talk about. What is PHP? It stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. And the first P does actually stand for PHP. So you can keep expanding it all the way out if you really want to. I don't recommend it. It's a waste of your time. And basically, it's a programming language that's designed to run on the web server. And really what it's designed to do is take in a program, take some of the parts of it that are specially marked as PHP parts, run them like a program, and then dump out all the results to the person asking for the web page. So, OK, why do you want to use it? You'll remember that the browser, when it's asking for the web page, the knight asking the castle in my earlier pictures, it uses a language called, or protocol called HTTP, which is basically a way of announcing what it wants and then getting back what it wants. So why not just write a program that can speak it? Well, here's a simple example of what an HTTP request looks like, and it's gross. And like I said, it's simple. You don't want to deal with that. You want to just have it magically work, because computers are magic, and we want to leverage the magic. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So PHP exists, and we can use PHP to sort of break up all of those hard things and make them really easy things. So things like cookies go into a variable. Things like parameters go into a variable. Things like everything else go into a variable. And then there's just a function call to do other stuff if you want your server to do other stuff. So why else? PHP is pretty standard. There's lots and lots and lots of code on the internet that's just free PHP code if you need help. There's lots and lots of documentation. There's lots of people that know it. And you can get it on like any server, really, more or less. And then, yeah, it's pretty easy. So where do you start? You need a server that can support it, obviously. Like I said, you can get it on most servers. That doesn't mean that you can just automatically have it on most servers. Luckily, Contrib does. So for those of you that were here on Thursday, at the very end, we talked a little bit about this thing called Contrib, which is basically a server run by Computer Club, or a bunch of servers, that will let you host your stuff for free, just for being a CMU student. So let's have them talk about that. Do you want the mic, or do you just want to shout?
I can just shout.
OK.
Hi, guys. Mind if I take over the computer?
Go for it.
So, my name's Derek. I'm president of the Computer Club.
I'm Tyler. I'm the secretary.
And so we're going to give just a really, really fast, like 5-minute run through of how do you get a website running on Contrib. And one of the key things about Contrib is that you can run interactive scripts. So you can run PHP, you can run Python, Perl, basically whatever you want, Ruby. And you can't do this on the Android on your Android website. But so what we do is we pull directly out of your AFS space from your www directory and serve up that content. And so we'll show you how to take a look at that and what infrastructure we have for managing that. All right, so here's the interesting part. So you can see www.contrib.andrew.cmu.edu tilde your Android ID. And so if you have anything in your www directory right now, and you browse to this with your Android ID, you shouldn't see the content just there. Now, if you remember back to computing at CMU days, you had to go to a website, you had to hit a publish my website button, and then twiddle your fingers, whatever, and then it would suddenly appear. So this is actually updated in real time, so you can do change 3 lines of code and just go immediately, and it'll be there, which is really nice. And so this website is actually PHP based, just some really basic includes and stuff, but it just works, which is awesome. And so, wow, really? So this is kind of one of the one URL to remember, contrib.andrew.cmu.edu. And from here you can see a little description, how to use it, and we have a bunch of documentation about running CGI scripts. I'll show you how to create and access an SQL database running on our servers, how to use WebISO authentication. So if you have an app or something and you want students to be able to log in just using their Android and password, this is a great way of doing it. It'll show you, the WebISO login that we're all so familiar with. Once it comes back, it turns out that it just gives you a cookie with username and yes, I am authenticated. And so our servers have all the backend to support that, and so you can just very easily access this from scripts. And then how to have your scripts actually be able to write data into your AFS space. And sorry for the old interface. We're actually going to be rebuilding our server this week. So when Tartan Hacks actually comes around, we'll have the latest and greatest of Python, Ruby, PHP, everything else. So, and hopefully the interface will be a little bit updated. But yeah, so the first thing is you can create databases. And I've already done this for Yahoo Hack Day back a couple of years ago. And it'll give you username, etc. And it'll actually, when you create it, it'll give you your passwords. So if you're writing any kind of interactive script, wanted to be able to write out to a database server, here's just a turnkey solution. You can have it running in 3 minutes, not have to worry about setting it up, running it, etc. Yeah. And so it shows exactly the same information. And here's where you can change the database passwords for either the admin or CGI accounts. And one of the nice things is this gives you the error logs of your CGI scripts. So if you're trying to work and debug, this can be really great. And it should just work. And it actually, just kind of as a side note, if you're in a student organization and an officer, we create websites and et cetera for that. So we have a control panel there, but that's kind of tangential to this talk. And then if you want to have your scripts write into your directory, you just need to go in here. It'll chug along for a minute, setting a whole bunch of permissions and actually negotiating with the Andrew web servers and the Computer Club web servers. You don't need to know the details, but yay. Now you can read and write. So that's really almost all there is. I'll show you just from a second, what it looks in the back end. We have documentation on running scripts, which maybe I can shrink a little. Yeah. And so you can see supported types. We'll have that updated. I don't think the list is going to change much. If you want to be able to run any scripting language that we don't have, feel free to send us an email, either officers@computerclub.cc.cmu.edu. We can get that email address sent out as part of the talk. And we'll see what we can do. If it's a fairly simple install, we can have that up and running quite quickly. If it's some huge infrastructure, if you say I want Redmine to run, which is a project management thing. Probably gonna have to do that yourself, but it should be pretty easy to set up anyways, just in your own web space. Accessing the databases. Do we have any simple code? No, we don't. But it's like accessing any other server. We have the server address, then you just fill in your own information. And using the web ISO authentication. So yeah, you just create one file, a .ht access file, and basically what that means is everything in this folder and everything in folders above this in your directory tree, you have to be authenticated using web ISO to log into. So it's fairly easy. And then inside of your scripts, you just pull out these two variables, and you can do logins and stuff like that. That's what there's there. Shrink this window, so it should hopefully fit. Yeah. So present work directory. I'm just in my AFS space under the www directory that everyone has. And I just have a whole bunch of PHP files, and they run. That's really all there is to it. All right, so yeah, so as you can see, the PHP files are executable. That turns out to be really critical when you want them to run. So make sure you do that. If you're not so familiar with Linux, you can either do this, if you're using something like FileZilla to upload your files into AFS space, I think you can just right-click and change permissions on it. If you're just SSHing in, chmod plus X, file name will give it execute permissions. Yeah, I think I actually. Right. So this is my Yahoo Hack Day project. Can everyone read this, by the way? Okay, good. And in here you can see I have the .ht access file, and it just has the exact 2 lines that's in the documentation, and then a login.cgi, which is, wow, that's rather hard to read, but basically you can see us pulling out the cookie for the Andrew ID, and up here, the remote user, which is going to tell you what the dcozal@andrew.cu.edu string is, slicing out the username, and that's really all there is to it. And you know that if they've gotten to this script, that they have correctly authenticated with web ISO. So I'll actually stick up some of this example code, and you'll be able to read about it in the documentation. And so this is Perl. But it's going to be almost exactly the same for PHP, Python, whatever you're writing it in. And that's really all that we have. If people have questions, feel free to ask now. I'll probably be hanging around a bit during the hack. And yeah, if you send problems or questions to officers or to Gripe, which is kind of our general question line, we'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Like I said, we're going to update all of the languages and stuff sometime this week, so there shouldn't be any urgent problems, hopefully. Yeah. So did anyone have any questions? Cool. I'll turn it back over to Jeff, and he can cover what we can actually write in PHP.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, if you try this later, oh yeah, what's up?
What about the forbidden error that we used to get on Thursday?
I think that might be because the stuff wasn't executable and we weren't marking it executable. And it still doesn't work? Yeah. Like I was about to say, if something still doesn't work, whatever it is, email us, email them. One of us will get back to you as soon as we can. All right, guys, so let's talk code. Let's actually sort of dive into this a little bit. What is PHP? Before the break, it's the server-side language thing, and it's a programming language, and you write a program, and it runs, and it dumps out a website, and everyone's happy. So if you remember from earlier and from yesterday and from the day before, we sort of talked about HTML where it has these tags. And then you open a tag, and then you put some stuff in. And then you close the tag, and that's like where your stuff goes. So PHP was designed to work really well with HTML. It's designed to sort of look and feel like HTML for the people that are writing it, and then act like a programming language when the server actually runs it. So PHP has a tag. I wouldn't say tags. PHP has the PHP tag. And it looks like this. In HTML, you have a paragraph tag, and then a paragraph, and then a divider tag, and divider, some stuff. PHP just has this question mark PHP tag. And then you don't close it. The close bracket isn't until the end of your code. So you do question mark PHP, and then a bunch of code, whatever your PHP code is, and then you just question mark end. And so this is a complete PHP file. If you type this in and make it runnable as a PHP file, it will work. And don't do it yet. We'll have a demo in a couple minutes or whenever I'm done with these slides, and we'll deal with it then. But like if you just look at this, it looks like an HTML document. There's HTML, there's head, title, end head, open body, and there's this block of PHP, and then end body, end HTML. And the block of PHP says, okay, echo this. And this just looks like HTML. And so this is the only part that actually is any different from things you've already seen. All the other stuff is just HTML. There's nothing special about it. This is the opening line, this is the closing line. There's really only one line of code here, and that's this guy. And what that'll do is show up like this. It looks exactly like regular HTML because it is. PHP is invisible to the browser. Unless you get an error and PHP dumps out a ton of error stuff, the person using your website will never know that you're using PHP, except that your file's end in .php. They'll never know exactly what kind of logic is happening. If they go to view source, they'll see this. They won't see your PHP code. That stays on the server, and if you protect it right, it will never get out. Because if you remember, PHP is just spitting out some HTML to the browser. It's not actually, it could be just a file that looks like this. Or it could be the script that looks like this that echoes this. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. So let's just talk a little bit about syntax. And this is going to go kind of quickly because, actually, show of hands, how many of you have some programming experience? Doesn't have to be PHP, sort of anything. OK, good. So I'm going to talk about this stuff, assuming that you already know a little bit about programming. I'm going to talk about it, assuming that you know what a variable is and what a loop is. I'll try and keep it basic. If you have questions, just shout at me. So variables, sort of the quintessential thing in programming. You can use them to store stuff. In PHP, they all start with a $sign. Any variable name, a $sign, and then some stuff means it's a variable. So after the $sign, there has to be a letter. I think, actually, I'm not totally sure about that, but pretend there does. There has to be a letter, or there are some special cases. And then after that letter, there are letters, numbers, underscores, whatever. So like Jeff, I'm just kind of wildly shooting a laser over my head. Like you can make Jeff equal to 5, and then a variable called Jeff will be 5. Doing what? You can make a string between quotes, which is just teaching PHP. That's sort of any text. You could have HTML in there. And then a quick note, variables in PHP are weakly typed, which means that, kind of like JavaScript earlier, variables just kind of have stuff in them. And if it's a number, then you can add stuff to it. And if it's a string, you can print it. And if it's a number and you need to make it look like a string, you can just kind of roll with it, and it'll usually work. That means that you can do a lot of really cool things, and your code can be a lot more flexible and it can be a little cleaner. It also means that there are some weird edge cases where, like the triple equals thing in JavaScript, that exists in PHP too. And sometimes if your code's not working, you might want to look that up and sort of be mindful of that. Arrays, another very basic thing in programming. You want to have ability to store lots of stuffs instead of just one stuff in a variable. And arrays in PHP are kind of magical. A little bit more magical than JavaScript, I would think. What you do, you say, make a variable called myArray, and then you use this array thing, which isn't strictly necessary, but it makes it easier to read, so I put it in here. And you just call this function called array, and that'll make an empty array. And then you can do things like say, OK, well, myArray 0, the first thing in the array, is the string tartan hacks. And then you can do myArray string key. Doesn't have to be a number. Why not? And that can be something else. And then you can skip straight to 4 and say myArray 4 equals 5. And this is completely valid in PHP. Arrays in PHP are really, really flexible. They're really, really powerful. They're magical. And then as a result, like if you actually run this code, internally, PHP will store it like this. It's an array of 3 things. The first one is index 0. It's a string. The second one is index string key. It's a string. The next one is index 4, and it has 5. You probably won't have to deal with this, but just to show you that it does work, I ran this code, and this is what I got. A little more basic syntax. Conditionals, loops, that sort of thing. If statements, for loops, while loops, whatever. They're all really, really similar to most other programming that you guys have done, as long as it was imperative programming, which is what all of you have done. So like, you can have an if statement. If Jeff is not equal to awesome, then call a function to signify that reality is broken, because that should never be true. You have a for loop. You can just make a variable, and then while I is less than 10, increment I each time, and do some stuff with that. It's a for loop just like it would be in any other programming language. Same thing with the while loop. If you have a variable called Jeff's awesomeness, and it's less than 9,000, just keep going and add 1 each time until it's not, and then you're done. Because we want my awesomeness to be over 9,000. One more thing, sort of basic for computer science, is the ability to make functions. Functions do stuff. It's if you have some code that needs to be reused, or you want to kind of segregate your code and make it a little cleaner, have a function. So functions are really basic. You have the keyword function that says this is going to be a function, and then you have a name, and then open parentheses, the parameter names, and close parentheses. And then you do some code, and you can return something if you want. You don't have to actually, some languages will make you say what you're going to return, what kind of thing. Because PHP is magic and or weakly typed and or magic, you don't have to actually say what you're going to return up here. You just return it. And note that here, when I print it out, echo is just, echo and print are kind of interchangeable in a lot of languages. You guys that have used Ruby probably used print to sort of print something out to the screen. Echo is like that. It just prints something out to the browser. Anything that you print out, if it's an error or something that you echo or something that someone else prints out, that all goes straight to the browser. So be sure that you do that. And just note that when you're adding strings together, you use dot and not plus. Knowing this will save you some trouble when you're trying to figure out why you're getting all these weird errors when all you want to do is print out the answer. It's probably because you're not using dot. One last thing that's sort of nice about PHP, it exists in some other languages too, but it's not as common, is if you remember that arrays are kind of magic, where they can sort of have any key. So your array doesn't necessarily go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could go 0, 1, fish, blue, 7. So you can actually loop over everything in an array and have in the loop, it's called a for each loop. So for each thing in the array, and the thing is the value, and then you can actually get the key, like what it's stored as. So if in the earlier array, if the first one is 0, the second one is string, and the third one is 4, this loop will go over 0, and key will be 0, and the value will be whatever the value was. And then key will be the string key, and the value will be whatever that value was. And then key will be 4, and the value will be whatever that was for each iteration of the loop. Some useful stuff, and this will make a lot more sense when we go through the demo, but I'm going to talk about it now so that you sort of have it in the back of your mind. Like I said, PHP is a server-side language, which means that it's designed to run on a server. And it's designed to make a lot of things really easy. So things like if you upload a file to it, or you submit some form content to it, or you do things like that, you have cookies, all of that is in these magical variables called autoglobals, which look like this. It's a $sign to say, OK, I'm a variable, then an underscore and some stuff. The ones I'm going to talk about right now are get and post, which are, if you've ever seen this, like you have a URL and then a question mark and some stuff, it's basically a clean way to get this stuff. So if your script is at mywebsite.com/test.php and you go to this, these variables will automatically be set for you. So if you know that you're expecting an x and a y, then you can just use these. You can use get x and get y, and that will be there. And like I said, more on that during the demo, which we'll get to in a minute. Databases. I know Derek talked a little bit about databases in the sense of you can set these up if you want to. I'm going to talk a little bit about what they are because we kind of waved our hands at them a bunch of times. A database is just basically any way to store data. More recently, there's these things called data stores, which are basically the same thing, except they're a little bit different. So what I'm going to talk about are relational databases, which are basically this. You have a table of information. The table has some headers, so actually we can draw. Let's say we want to keep track of everyone in CMU in a table. We can make a table, and we can have the first row be their Andrew ID. And then the second row can be their first name, or second column, sorry. And the next row can be their last name. And then we can do like their major, why not? And then every time you add a row, you could just add some information. And you can say, okay, well, I'll put myself in there. And then you can just keep sort of adding stuff. And a database, at least a relational database, is really just a table like this. There's not really any magic to it other than that. It's just a table where you can store data. You can add rows, you can delete rows, you can select some of the rows out of it, and then use those, do some processing on them. You can update them as you see fit. You can use them in your application, whatever. It's just a nice, clean way to store data. More recently, there's this idea of a document-oriented database, or document-oriented data store, where instead of storing everything as a table, you store it as like a thing, and that thing can have any sort of structure you want. It can have sub-things, and those sub-things can have their own sub-things, and those things can have data in them. We're not going to go into that because while this is sort of changing, that's sort of better suited for JavaScript applications and for client-side stuff. And also, in terms of intuition, if you've never seen any of it before, a table is a lot easier to think about than this abstract amorphous stuff. And PHP also has really easy functions to use MySQL databases, which are sort of the industry standard, or one of the industry standards for relational databases. So that's my note on databasing. Any questions on that, real quick? Because I know I kind of blew through it. OK, if you have anything, just shout it at me. So we're going to talk a little bit about MySQL, because it's really common. It's pretty standard. There are a couple quirks that you're going to have to deal with, but we can find our way around those. And for the most part, it's easy. Well, first, a little bit on the name. SQL stands for something, SQL. Do you guys know what it stands for? Something structured query language? Yeah. So basically, the SQL standard, the SQL standard, is a sort of defined standard for how to access a database. And then some people put together this implementation of it called MySQL, or they took all those commands and they said, OK, well, you can feed them into us and we'll work. And there's another one called Postgres, or PostgreSQL. I don't even know how you're supposed to say it. That's like the other competing standard. I like them a little better because they added some extra features. But this is more common, and Computer Club supports this, so we're going with that. So the basic sort of things you need to know about a database are how to select information out of it. This is basically just get some rows. Insert some new rows, delete the rows you don't want anymore, and update the rows that are already there. There are a lot of other things you can do that make databases really, really, really powerful. But because most of you, I think, have never seen any of this before, or at least that's what I thought when I was making the slides, we're just going to go over these. And like I have on the slide, it's really just going to be a quick, here's what you can do. I don't really expect anyone to come out of reading these slides with a full understanding of how to use a database. We're going to have a little demo, and then we'll walk through it step by step, and hopefully you'll get a better understanding then. So like I have on here, when you forget everything that I said, Google it. There's lots of really good resources on all of this stuff. So select. The select statement is the statement that you'll use the most if you write an application that uses a database. What it does is just you take some of these rows and you select some of them, and then you get out the ones you selected, and then you can do stuff with them, with the data that's in them. You can either say, I only want some fields, so I have select fields. That could be like select Andrew ID and first name. If you don't care about the rest of the stuff, you can tell it to only get those two. If you just want everything, you can use a star. And a lot of things that you'll see are just select star from the table. And then, like I said, you can only select some of it if you only want some of the information. So you can add what's called a where clause and just say select star from my table where, say, the first name equals Jeff. And then that would return me and then all the other Jeffs in CMU, assuming this table is up to date. Pay attention to the where clause, because that actually shows up a lot, as you'll see in the next few slides. The next thing is insert. If you want to actually add information to your table. Right now I only have one row in there. If you wanted to add more people to this database, you have to insert them in. So the syntax for that looks like this. You insert into the name of the table, and then you have this keyword values, and then just each thing. So for this one, you do insert into table, let's call this the CMU table. Insert into table CMU, values, JD Cooper, comma, Jeff, comma, Cooper, comma, computer science. And it'll say, OK, good, and it adds them. Delete is basically the same syntax as select. You'll notice that instead of select something from table name, where, conditions, whatever, this is just delete from table name, where, conditions. And basically, anything that matches the condition after the where clause, and you can have more than one, we'll get to that, will just get deleted from the table. So if you don't specify where, and you do delete from table name, semicolon, end, it'll delete everything in your table. That's bad. I've done it. People have done it. It's not good. So be careful. And then update. Update's this sort of weird hybrid between insert and select. And the syntax for it looks like this. You update table name, and then you set some columns separated by commas. And then, again, a where clause. You only want to update some of them. You probably don't want to update all of them. So make sure you do that. Otherwise, everything in the table gets changed. And setting everyone in CMU's name to Jeff, well, I think it'd be awesome. Most of you probably don't. So how do you actually make a table? Probably something that would be useful to know. There are some tools that will let you do it. One of them is called PHPMyAdmin, where you just take this giant, massive blob of PHP, and you drop it onto your server somewhere, and then suddenly you have a web interface. It's just a web app that will let you do all these things. Or you can do it like you can just access the MySQL console by yourself and like run create table and give it a bunch of options that I always have to look up. Or you can ask the guy that runs your server to do it. So Computer Club gave sort of they showed you the website where it'll set up a table for you, or at least it'll set up a database. So generally, ask the guy that runs the server is a good place to start. All right, so we talked a little bit about PHP, and again, sort of blitz lightninged through it. We talked a little bit about MySQL, and you can probably see how it might be useful to have your applications be able to access information in the database. So here's a little bit how. First, you have to connect to the database server. What's cool about all these systems is that the database can actually be running somewhere completely different from the rest of your application, or it can be running exactly in the same place. Either way, you have to connect to it. So you just run this PHP function called MySQL_connect, and then you give it the name of the server and your username and password. All of these things, by the way, you get from whoever's running the server. So if you're using the contrib servers, then you can get them from the Computer Club website. If you're using someone else, you can get them from them. And then you run this function called MySQL_select_database. What happens there is there's a database server that's running. There's the MySQL server, and the Computer Club one will have everybody's databases. It'll have all the stuff that anyone's ever used contrib for, all on this one server. And you only really have access to your part of it. So what happens is when you set up the server, and if you're using contrib, it'll tell you this information. It'll give you the name of your database. And you just have to say, OK, well, I want to use this database. And then you just run this command, and suddenly you're using this database. A quick note on naming. There's database the concept, and there's database the thing. And database the concept is sort of what we've been talking about. In MySQL terminology, there is the database, which is your thing. For me, it would be like JD Cooper _contrib database, whatever. And then in there, I can have as many tables as I want. So typically, you do this once at the beginning to say, OK, well, I want to talk to this server. Then you say, I want to access this database, which has all my tables in it. And then you're good to go. After that, you make a query. So all the stuff we just talked about, this stuff, insert, delete, update, I missed one, select. Those are all just, like I have the syntax right there. Here's how you do it. So you just drop it in. You say, here's a result. You make a variable for whatever it's going to ask for. And then MySQL_query, and it's stuff. So if you want to get all the users from the users table, you can store those into a variable called users, and you do MySQL query select star from users. Done. And then to sort of get out, what that'll do is that'll return this whole table. And you can't really do much with the whole table. You kind of have to operate on it one row at a time. So what you can do is do this loop, which is in all the documentation online. you do while variable row equals MySQL fetch array users. And this is doing some magic behind the scenes. Basically, this will let you loop over every row in the table. I don't even really know what's going on there. I could guess. And then you can just do something with this variable row, which for every column in the table, you can just access the column by name here. So for this table, it would be row Andrew ID, and then it would have JD Cooper, or row first name would have my name, row last name my major, or whatever. And I know that a lot of you probably are just standing here going, what? And I know that I would be too, because like I said, I lightning through this. So let's actually do something. Let's do it. So I'm going to, hold on, you guys probably can't see that. Better? Yeah. I'm going to, you guys can feel free to follow along or not, either way. Let's just go through, I have some stuff in here. Yes, let's make something cool. Look, my email. Okay, so we can access the stuff. Let's make some stuff. The first thing we're going to want to do is just test to make sure that PHP works. So we'll make a file called index.php, and you guys can feel free to write it in your own text editor and then move it over. I'm working right on the server because, one, that's the way I like to do it, and two, it'll make this whole presentation a little bit cleaner. So we're going to make a file called index.php, and we're just not going to put anything in it except php echo hello, I'm PHP. And then close the PHP tag. Save it, and then it broke. I actually have no idea what just happened. Huh? Can you guys get to this link? Or did it just die in a hole? Oh, there we go. Okay, so remember what they were saying about making it executable? I forgot that. All right, so it works now. And you'll notice that this web page is just the words, hello, I'm PHP. If you actually view the source, it's just the words, hello, I'm PHP. There's nothing else going on there. What I just did, view source somewhere around here. It's tools view source. I don't even remember where it is. Control U, by the way, will view source from most browsers. Whatever. So you'll notice it's just this. If I wanted to actually put some HTML around it, it'd be like HTML head title. Not the best HTML in the world, but oh, by the way, can you guys see that? Is it readable mostly? Shout out at me if you can't read anything at any point. You'll notice that you can refresh this, and it'll still look the same, except now my computer broke. Oh, there it is. Okay. You'll notice that here, now we have all the other stuff we added, but the hello, I'm PHP is still just hello, I'm PHP. It doesn't matter what we add. There's always going to be this. It's just going to show up as whatever gets outputted by the script. So I could make a variable called x and make it the secret to the world. And then I could say x equals, I don't know. We'll just store the secret of the world in there somewhere. If we refresh this, it doesn't matter how many times we refresh it. That will never show up. Like I said, PHP is entirely hidden from the browser. So let's actually do something useful. Let's make, I don't know, we can do a to-do list. It's a good example that I totally didn't steal from the earlier talk. So I don't know, Ryan, did you talk about forms yesterday in HTML? OK. I'm going to do some really sort of pretty hacky HTML just to sort of get the PHP point across. There are better ways to do this, and I'll find some resources for you and email them out. But this is just the quick way, so here goes. HTML has this thing called a form, which is basically, it tells the browser that, OK, well, the stuff between the open form tag and the closed form tag is stuff that I'm going to want to send to a server somehow. So we'll do form, and then you put some stuff in. Action equals process.php. Method equals get. And then we'll do some, I'll just do and what this will show up as is just this. Like I said, this is really kind of an ugly, hacky way to do it. But we have this text field, and we can type stuff in, and then we can press the submit button, and it'll say 404 not found, because what I did is this says make an HTML form. The thing we want to submit to is called process.php, and we want to use get to do it. So let's open up a new file called process.php. And this will just be, I don't know, we'll just make it say hi for right now. It doesn't have to do anything special. Whatever. And now if we press submit, it will wait. Wait some more. And it'll say hi. One thing that you'll notice is that we put in the other file, we have this thing that says, OK, well, we're a text input, and the name is to-do thing. And then when we come over to the browser, you'll notice that in the URL, it's process.php, question mark, and then to-do thing equals the thing we typed. And then if I go back, and I change it to like Jeff Cooper, then to-do thing becomes Jeff Cooper. And so what we can do, like I said earlier, is we can say, let's do some PHP, and then say the user said, and then just, if you'll remember, this variable is magic. And then we save that, and the user said Jeff Cooper. So what it's doing basically is PHP is automatically pulling out this. And if we had lots of different form elements, like if we added the whole thing where it's like, OK, well, who are you, and what do you want, and if we did all these things, we could just add another line for this. And then I didn't save it or something. All right. Now there's 2 lines. And suddenly it just dumps them out side by side. If you wanted, you could like put a space between them. Whatever. OK, so that's sort of the very basics. That's not legible, is it? I don't really know what to do about it, though. All right, so any questions so far, by the way? Other than, Jeff, what are you doing up here? Let's go to the contrib site. me go to my contrib. Click here, okay. And let's make a new database. So okay, cool. So suddenly we have a database that's called JD Cooper, and oh wait, never mind. Database is called contrib_JD Cooper. The username is jdcooper_CGI, and the password it says I have to set. So I'm just going to set the password to ASDF. Try not to hack this, please. Okay, cool. So if you remember the syntax that I had up on the slide before, we want to connect to the database. So we can do MySQL_connect, and then the server name is going to be whatever their server name is. I don't actually know what it is. Server name is this. My username is jdcooper_CGI, and this will be different for all of you. Password is ASDF. And then we can say, if the connection was successful, then we connected. And now if we go to process.php, we connected. Yay, it works. So after that, we can start doing things. Actually, really quickly, I'm going to really quick, I'm actually going to make myself a database. So hold on. Actually, no, I'm not, because it hates me right now. All right, I don't want to actually bore you guys with the sort of mucking around in the database server. So I'm going to go through sort of a high level, and then I'll finish the code and post it on GitHub, because I don't want to keep you too long. I'm almost out of time as it is. So just really quickly, we have this text box. That's the thing you want to do. You want to submit it. And let's say you want to, I don't know, send an email. I actually don't know. PHP has a command called mail, where you can say, I want to send an email to somebody, and I want the subject to be subject, and I want it to say hi. I don't actually know if it's installed on the contrib servers, so we're about to find out. And it looks like it is. It looks like I just sent myself a bunch of mail. So let's just make a basic thing that says, OK, you want to send in let's say you just want to send something to me. So we'll not deal with the database right now because it hates me and I don't want to waste all of your time. We'll just say, OK, so we'll make a variable called what to send, and we'll just get it right from what the user said. So remember that this what to send comes straight from here. So it actually should be called what to email. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, OK, well, sending your message to Jeff. And then we'll put some HTML in there. just a new line. The message was, and then what to send. And then right now, if we submit something to this, it'll say sending a message to Jeff. The message was, hi Jeff. And then we can just use PHP's mail command to send some mail. And then we can tell the user that it actually worked. So now if we run this, hi Jeff, your presentation sucked. Then it'll spin for a while, and then it'll say, OK, it worked. And then if I go check my email, hopefully I have a bunch of messages. I don't know, hopefully it worked. It looks like it did. Yeah, somebody said something. Hi Jeff, your presentation sucked. So yeah, like I said, the databases aren't working for me right now. I will put together something and send that out to you guys in the next day or two. Yeah, what's up?
What is another from address? You just use the mail?
The mail command is sort of this weird thing where it's set up by the server and it's run by the server. So Unix actually has a built-in mail thing. So for me, it's actually coming from jdcooper@club.cc.cmu.edu. There are ways that you can change it or fake changing it to make it seem like it came from someone else. But basically, it's something that's set up by the server, and PHP doesn't have that much control over it. So if you send something if you're using contrib, then it'll come from your Android ID at club.cc.cmu.edu. There are ways to change like who you reply to. So when you hit reply, it'll go to somebody else. And I'll put that in the document that I sent out as well, because I don't know it off the top of my head. So if I refresh this, some of you sent me mail, right? No, no one sent me mail. I'm sad. So we can do something even funnier. So like if what to send is, I don't know, you suck, then we'll just rewrite it. And then as long as we kind of drop this in up here, then if I go back to my little demo, not this one, it'll say, you're great, and it'll send me a message. So what I'm really trying to get at here is not that PHP can do all these silly things, but that it is just a programming language. And you can just write some code and have it work. And it'll output a website. You can do all these other things. Like I said, there's the mail command. If you go through the PHP Online documentation, there's all kinds of other silly things you can do. Really, anything that you could do in a program, you can do in PHP. So any questions about anything I did? What's up?
So currently you have your input text box to be inside a form, right?
Right.
So what if it's not inside a form? Would you still get the value?
If it's not inside a form, then submitting won't do anything. So what do I have here?
PHP still get that value?
PHP can only get things that are in a form. Oh, sorry. Well, they'll only, yeah, PHP will only get things that are in the form. But what you can do is form actually has some elements that are type hidden. And what that'll do is not show anything to the user, but you can set a value. You can use JavaScript, and you can set a value in there. So you can have it that when you click the submit button, it'll just load some stuff into some hidden forms and then send it off. There are also other ways to do it. Ryan, did you talk about? You didn't. There's other ways to do it. jQuery actually has some ways to sort of do it asynchronously, so you don't even have to submit the page. You can just submit some stuff out to the server. We'll find some links to tutorials on that, and again, put them in the email. Any other questions? All right, well, that's all I have for PHP. I'll send out an email, like I said, to everyone that's here, and you can forward it to your friends with things that I forgot, things I said wrong, things I should have said, and then just links to tutorials for sort of all these different things. So thank you.